YouTube Ozick Owen, the Goat House is back with some playoff predictions after free agency before the NFL draft. A little early, but we'll make some updated ones after the draft and right before the season. We'll have full draft coverage here on the Goat House and even on our Twitter. So join us, like, subscribe, turn notifications on live during day one of the NFL draft. Hopefully you join us for that as well. So we're going to go seed by seed here. Kind of boring with the one seeds, kind of obvious, I suppose, but and then we'll break down my game by game, playoff predictions here in this video as well. Have a Super Bowl prediction, so this will be a lot of fun here. But again, before the draft, after free agency, so we know what most of the rosters look like here. But the Chiefs at the one seed, I know they traded L'Jarius Sneed, but they do such a good job coaching on the defensive side, and they do such a good job, finding new, specifically defensive backs. Trent McDuffie's a star in the making, maybe already there. Karlaftis is getting better and better. So I don't know if they take that much of a hit. Honestly, I think they're going to be fine. I know it's a big-time player. And then offensively, adding Hollywood Brown, is he the best player in the world? No, but he's solid, and he fits the Chiefs' offense so perfectly. They got better. Rashee Rice obviously stays out of trouble off the field. Very solid young stud as well. In the Niners, they usually do very, very well in the regular seasons because they have one of the more talented rosters and very well coached. They're just more physical, usually faster than the other teams. So yeah, I think these teams will dominate enough in the regular season where they'll get the one seeds, in this upcoming season. For right now, it's my prediction. On to the two seeds, I'm going to go some young teams with young quarterbacks. I'm going to go with the Texans at the two seed there, led by C.J. Stroud. They get even better, by getting Tank Dell back. But they add Joe Mixon on defense. They add Danielle Hunter. You probably got to pay attention to interior defense line, maybe corner in the draft. But so well coached on defense by DeMeco Ryans. He's going to have those guys balling. But they're going to get after the quarterback. They're going to make big plays in the passing game and the running game. They have weapons. I like this team. It's an up-and-coming team that can do some damage right now. Packers is the two seed. This was really tough because the Packers and the Lions for the NFC North basically have to predict who's winning it there. It's so tough because they're both so good, and they should be good for a long time here. Again, tough because I think the Lions won it last year, and I think they're a little more consistent. I'm thinking regular season, who's a little more consistent with playing the best they possibly can play. I'm like, I'm thinking Lions, but we got to have them win the division. But again, the Packers got so good at the end of last year. They're so well coached as well. Switching defensive coordinators probably for the better here. They add some legit talent with Xavier McKinney on defense, Josh Jacobs on offense. They should do some damage to the draft with a lot of draft picks. They did that damage last year. But a big difference, not a huge difference, but the difference in the couple of opponents on the schedule, the Lions playing the first place. The AFC East too, and the NFC South it is for the NFC North. So maybe that could be the difference, but that is a battle. Packers versus Lions. I'm feeling the Packers winning the North, maybe a tiebreaker. That's how good it is. So that's my 2 seed for the NFC. 3 seeds. I'm going to go Bengals, who were a little bit of a letdown in terms of my predictions last year, but they were completely beat up, mainly at quarterback, looking at Joe Burrow. So you do have to bank on them staying healthy. Maybe is it a little bold? Burrow's had multiple injuries. I like to think he's going to be okay, but we'll see. But I'm kind of banking on that here. They do go from Mixon to Zach Moss. I didn't love that, but I don't think they take too much of a hit. At the end of the day, they have tons of talent, in terms of weapons. The offensive line, it can't be going south. It's got to be going north, even if it's by a little bit. In defense, so well coached, and they got some talented players. They've added quite a few quite a few players. Look at guys at, the safety position, and then Rankins on the inside and the D-line. So they've done a solid job there. They're a really, really good team if they're healthy. If I can fully trust them to be healthy and kind of get back on track, I'd probably predict them to be better in a 3 seed. And I got the Falcons. Weird kind of seeing them in the top 3, but this is one of the best rosters if you just take away, positional value, and they're good at those strong positions as well, except for edge, which I think they do take care of in the draft, but we'll see. And that's where my predictions could change after the draft. Do teams disappoint? Do they do the unexpected? Do they, get the job done like we expect? But really good roster. We know that Raheem Morris can have that defense playing very well. Well coached on defense and offensively. Kirk Cousins isn't the elite quarterback, but he's a very, very solid quarterback that wins football games in the regular season, and he's very accurate, and he has weapons to distribute the ball to that they'll be able to pass the ball and run the ball at a high level. I don't want to say, I don't think any division's easy, but I guess I won't say an easy division because the Bucs were really solid last year. The Saints should be better this year, but we'll see. I thought they'd be better last year than they were, so we'll see there. The Panthers will definitely be better. They could be a little sneaky. But it's not the NFC North. You don't have to deal with, like, the Packers got to deal with the Lions. The Niners got to deal with the Rams. I don't think they really have that. So I like their shot for having a really solid regular season. I actually almost put them at 2, so it's actually kind of close there. Coming in at 4 for both the AFC and NFC. I got the Bills at 4. Weird putting them down at 4. It just shows how stacked it is, but it was almost a 50-50, close to a 50-50 call on who I have winning the AFC East, so we'll see the other team that I have in the playoffs coming up next year. But yeah, the Bills, interesting what they did to their roster so far. Lose Gabe Davis, bring in Curtis Samuel, 2 totally different type of receivers, but maybe they offset, maybe they're a little bit more explosiveness with Samuel perhaps. Offensive line on paper, they've definitely made worse, because of the cuts they've had to do. They've definitely made it worse, but I don't think it's like that much of a drop off. And then defensively, they need to get better in terms of edge. They don't have Leonard Floyd, not the best pass rusher in the world, but they have a little bit of a drop off there. They definitely take a hit in terms of safeties. They don't have Tre'Davious White anymore, but they didn't really have him last year either. All of it together, it kind of feels like they got worse. Technically, they did, but you do have to factor in how many injuries they had last year. Look at the linebacker position, kind of by default, that's going to get better. So kind of back and forth with the Bills. Josh Allen and company is going to be a problem, in the regular season. I'm saying just in the regular season, but no, in the playoffs as well. It was tough. It was tough putting them at 4, but I really like all these teams there. So we're kind of splitting hairs with these teams. And I got the Eagles, as of right now, winning the NFC East. I had the Cowboys winning it last year. I had the Eagles winning the year before, so we kind of been on track with most divisions, I guess we are, but on track with those. And I think the Eagles, the difference what they did and the Cowboys did in the offseason is really what splitting it up. And then look at the coaches they've brought in as well. Kellen Moore, maybe not the best play caller, or I shouldn't say play caller. I think he's a decent play caller. I was going to say maybe not the best offense coordinator on the planet, but I think he's pretty solid. I think he could work with the Eagles there. Again, they've added talent on both sides of the ball. Saquon Barkley should be a lot of fun here. So I got the Eagles winning the NFC East. I do think those other 3 teams are a little bad. They're going to be a little more consistent, I think, than the Eagles, but it'll be pretty close. So those are our division winners. Now let's go on to the 5 seed. I got the Jets. It's tough to predict the Jets because injuries. I had them winning the AFC East last year, but right away, week 1, Aaron Rodgers goes down. I'm like, all right, that blew that. And the defense obviously played the part. I don't know if they would, even if Rodgers was in, it's tough to say, it'd be an assumption. It would have been interesting, but I'm kind of, after seeing them play, but it's tough because he wasn't in there all game. I would say they probably wouldn't have won because the offensive line was still a disaster. But this year, they're going to be really good if they stay healthy, but that's Aaron Rodgers, that's Tyrone Smith. I'm not really worried about Morgan Moses, but a little up there in age. Mike Williams. Defensively, they're going to be really solid. They even add Hassan Reddick recently. The defense can be balling. Offense, if it's healthy, it's going to be playing well. They could afford, one guy or so going down like everybody has. But really with Rodgers, he's got to stay healthy. I'm going to bank on him staying healthy. And man, if I felt 100% confident, I feel confident, I put him in the playoffs because if Rodgers goes down, they're not making the playoffs. I don't think. But if I was 100% healthy, I'd probably have them winning the division. I just think, with their durability concerns, the Bills had like fluky ones last year. I know Rodgers is a little fluky, but where he's at is, coming off that injury, where he's at age, it wouldn't be the flukiest thing. But and the Bills have Josh Allen being such a problem week in, week out. I'll go with the Bills there, but that is close. Obvious one with the Lions. If you don't have them winning the division, you got to have them at the 5 seed. The Packers and Lions are worthy of the 1, 2, or 3, top 2 seed. The Lions might be a little more consistent than the Packers. The Packers, maybe they have that element of surprise now with a new-looking defense. They've added some legit talent, young talent on their team, and they're kind of an up-and-coming, growing team. They're kind of the NFC version of the Texans. Texans are the AFC version, of the Packers from the NFC. So comparable there. A little bit difference in schedule, like it's slightly easier. We think now, but you never know because there's some teams that are surprises. So that's going to be good. Those are juggernauts in the NFL and the NFC at least. On to the 60. There's so many good teams. It was tough leaving some teams out. I had the Ravens, who were by far the best team in the regular season in the AFC. But for right now, look at their roster right now. I mean, look at their coaching staff got depleted in their roster. The offensive line needs a whole revamp. They still badly need other receivers to help out Zay Flowers, help out Lamar Jackson. They took some hits throughout this roster. They do get Derrick Henry, which I love. Like, how are you going to deal with the running game of Lamar and Derrick Henry? You can't really just stack the inside. Got to worry about the outside as well. So I love that. But this is a team that, we'll see where I have them after the draft because their roster and combining the roster with the coaching staff, it took a major, major hit. Honestly, roster-wise, you could argue that there's a team I have out maybe in the same division that right now, today, as I'm talking, here in April, that there's other teams that maybe right now are better on paper because the Ravens almost got, I don't want to say gutted. Maybe that's a little, if you factor in the staff with the players, maybe they need offense. They need a lot of things here. So it's going to be tough to kind of repeat, but they're just so, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, those guys are just nightmares, especially during the regular season. Forget, that hump they got to get over in the playoffs for right now because we're figuring out, where everyone's seated. So it's hard, based on, again, on paper, I think there's probably some teams better, but it's impossible to leave the Ravens out right now. They'll do some damage, in the regular season. And I got the Rams at 6. I love the way Matt Stafford played last year. I was probably his biggest fan. I'm not really necessarily, I'm a fan of every NFL player, but not necessarily a Stafford fan, but based on how he played last year, I thought he played out of his mind last year. Like I thought he was elite, really. I think the stats look good, but I think they could be a little misleading. I think he was much better than that. He played incredible last year. So as long as he stay healthy, he can keep going. He can keep going and continue to play well. Puka, Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams was a monster last year. He's got to stay healthy, but they improved the interior. They get Dotson back and they add Jonah Jackson. So could the running game even be better? Defense, they've actually have added in weak spots. They do lose Aaron Donald. They do have young players, and they continue to draft well. I think they'll be a good team still. I think a reason if they didn't make the playoffs, I think it'd be because of durability, like injuries, which is very possible. That's kind of my thinking last year, like how healthy will they be? They weren't even fully healthy, but they're much healthier than I thought they were going to be last year, so that helped them be great, which they could be. So I got them as a 6 seed. If they didn't lose Donald, man, that's tough because they can actually, to retirement, Aaron Donald, they could actually compete with the Niners. And then, could they get could they get the 5 seed with the Lions, Packers? These teams are so good. In the 7 seed, it's really tough leaving some teams out, but it just shows how good these teams are. The Jags down at the 7 seed. I almost put them ahead of the Ravens, but the Ravens are going to do some damage in the regular season. The toughest, there's a lot of teams that are playoff worthy. They very well could easily be in the playoffs, but I'm not going to sit here and list off all of them. But the one team that was really tough was the Browns, kind of leaving the Browns out. I was a big believer in the Browns last year, but it didn't go quite how I planned. And that's the argument. Like, everything went wrong, and they still made the playoffs. So they got to make the playoffs this year, right? You want to believe that, but that's really not how things work. They could, but that wouldn't be the reason they make the playoffs. They definitely have the talent. Like right now, their roster is probably more talented than the Ravens, but it's the Ravens here. It's just how healthy will the Browns be? Will they get through that situation again if it happens last year? They kind of got figured out down the stretch, kind of relied on having like an easier schedule down the stretch as well. But again, they could be healthy this year. It's hard to go off last year, but defense is a lot of talent, but they got predictable, though. Too much man coverage. Teams are going to be prepared for that this year. I think the Browns win a lot of football games. I think they'll win 11 football games. They can miss the playoffs, perhaps. Jags at a portion of last year where they looked like one of the best teams in football, and then things went south. They had bare misses with, like, big plays and then ultimately winning games. Like, could they be on the more fortunate side of those things this year? Sure. Christian Kirk went down, and they felt like a whole different team. He's such an important part of that offense, how they use him and how good of a player he is. So you'd think he stays healthy this year. Defense gets better at Ryan Nielsen. He's a good defensive coach, and they add guys like Armstead and just other players they've added that helps them. So, talking like that, I almost want to have them better in the 7th seed. They could easily win the division. They could be that bounce-back team this year. It's tough having them out. It's just Browns, Dolphins, Steelers, there's a lot of teams that can make the playoffs. It's just these are the teams I felt great about. Again, kind of going back, I think today, April 1st, teams might have a better full roster than the Ravens because they kind of got gutted there, but it's just tough to leave them out. And the Cowboys usually play very, very well in the regular season because they're a good team, and they got good quarterback play. They got good offensive line play. Really solid defense. I like Mike Zimmer a lot. The defense is more built for Dan Quinn's man coverage than Mike Zimmer's zone, though. So is that a little bit of an adjustment? Does Zimmer run more man than in the past? Was usually a cover 2 guy in the past. You mix it up. But I think Zimmer's he's a hell of a defensive coach. And I think he could be good, but it could be like a little bit of adjustment. Not much noise in the offseason so far for the Cowboys, kind of just lost rather than gained. But I think they are better than the kind of the alternatives here for the NFC. Could those other NFC East teams be sneaky? The Giants, look at what they did 2 years ago. The Commanders have done a pretty good job. Could they be sneaky? The Bears are about to get 2 first-round picks on top of adding Keenan Allen. Could they be sneaky? The Vikings have talent everywhere, but with the quarterback situation, I don't know, about them. And then Seahawks, we're used to seeing the Seahawks in this conversation. Yeah, they're probably the next team, I'd say, but they're a little bit of a process, kind of retooling the roster still. Bucks, how did I forget the Bucks? The Bucks looked really solid. They won a playoff game. So Bucks, probably the Bucks, probably the next team actually. But I think it was a little tougher with the AFC leaving the Browns out. So those are my playoff teams right now. Again, honestly, Texans at 2, Jags at 7. Since they're so far apart. But honestly, I could see a world where we flip those. If the Bengals stay healthy, I think that's a Super Bowl team perhaps. We could flip the Bills and the Jets. We could flip the Ravens and the Browns. The Browns, hell, they can win their division. It's possible as well. NFC, again, if the Rams stay fully healthy, could they do some damage at the top? Falcons got a really good roster. I think it's built for the regular season and maybe more. Packers, Lions, you can flip those teams. So that's my seedings. Let's wild card round. I have the Texans, Bengals, and Bills winning. So the Texans beating the Jags, absolute battle. Bengals beating the Ravens. I think the Bengals have a better roster right now. It's all about staying healthy. It's about staying healthy for both teams. And the Ravens, they're not really built fully for the playoffs, and they can do some damage in the playoffs. But I like how the Bengals are more suited. As long as they're healthy in the playoffs, they are definitely more suited to win that playoff game. And I'll take the Bills over the Jets, but that'd be a hell of a game. I'm just going to trust Josh Allen and the Bills. Funny, saying after last year, but durability, situation over the Jets. So Texans, Bengals, Bills, and then Packers over Cowboys again would be more obvious this time. It wasn't obvious last time, but it'd be obvious this time. And they, put it on them last time, this past year. Falcons and Rams, I really thought about. I really, really thought about because the Rams are probably more, they're more experienced for this. Kirk Cousins is a really good quarterback. Can he win this big game here? I'm not really going to doubt him. I think the issue last time was the defense, so it wasn't on Cousins. Stafford and company. I mean, if they're in the playoffs and they're healthy, they're so dangerous. They know Raheem Morris's defense, but no Aaron Donald this time around. The Falcons are much more balanced of a roster to the Falcons. And, again, the Eagles could get back on track, but I didn't really hesitate here. I'd like the Lions all day. I mean, the Lions and the Packers. The toughest thing out of this whole thing was leaving the Browns out and then Packers and Lions at the 2 seed. That was the toughest decision. So I take the Lions over the Eagles easily here. And the Eagles get back on track. They've done a really solid job. But that's why I have winning in the wild card round. Let's see the divisional round. We got the Chiefs over the Bills. Maybe a time's going to come where the Bills get them. And I took the Texans over the Bengals. That's a really tough one because man, part of me is like, yeah, will the Bengals stay healthy? So it's a little bit safer to go with the Texans going in the long run. But if they get to the point where they're playing head-to-head, they're probably going to be healthy at this stage. Like they would have to be getting to this point. And maybe the Bengals would get them with that experience and how good Joe Burrow is. It's tough. It's so the Texans at home. How healthy will the Bengals be? I'll take the Texans. And then I actually in the ended up being 1-5, the rematch of the NFC Championship last year. The Lions blew. I got them getting it this time. I got them getting it. The Niners. I don't know if they're necessarily. Well, Purdy can continue to get better, but as this team as a whole, like the roster of top to bottom, is it getting better? And they're still going to be really good. I got them at the 1 seed. They can win the Super Bowl for sure, but I think they're more of their prime, unless Purdy just clicks into a different gear, which I think he's underrated. He gets ripped a little bit too much, not really deserving, but if he really takes it up another notch, I'm not really saying he needs to, but if he does, like that's the team, but I don't know if they're necessarily getting better. It might be like a slight drop down compared to the last couple of years. The Lions could be getting better. They typically draft very well. We'll see. So I like the Lions getting revenge, and I'll take the Packers over the Falcons. Falcons, again, if you look at just full rosters, don't factor in positional value, and usually you think quarterback. They got a good quarterback, but you just don't factor in position value. Edge is kind of the issue there. Falcons might actually have the best roster football. It's debatable, but they're up there. Just at this stage, I'm going to trust the coaching of the Packers at home. But both teams sure will be able to throw the ball. They have the weapons. They'll be able to run the ball. It could come down to defense. At first glance, you think, as bad as the Packers defense was last year, Falcons got to be better. Watch out for those Packers. Watch out for that Packers defense this year. I think they could really take a step up. So I will take the Packers. So that means what we could have had this year, an NFC North showdown in the NFC Championship game. Ended up going with the Chiefs again over the Texans. Just too young for the Texans. The Chiefs might have got better. So well coached. And I'm feeling the Packers at the moment, but man, this is what the drafts can be all about. Packers. I'm looking at a lot of teams. But besides the obvious teams picking at the top, what are you looking for? I'm looking for these two teams right here in the NFC North. The Packers had so many players. They had a long list of draft picks in last year's draft. And so many players contributed and played a huge part, made a huge impact last year. And really not their first round pick. And could Van Ness step up this year? But so they have a load of picks again this year, sitting pretty good on day 2. Let's see what damage they can do. And I knew they had especially I thought they knocked day 3 out of the park. Which was a bulk of their impact. Guys that contributed. So let's see if they do it again. In the Lions, they continue to draft very well. Brad Holmes has been drafting guys that I'm super high on. I love what he's been doing. So who's going to win the draft? Who's going to win the NFC North? I'm going to be surprised if it's not either one of these two teams. Again, the Bears could be sneaky. The Vikings get a certain quarterback in the draft. I think it's unrealistic, though. Then I guess they can be sneaky. But I'm feeling the Packers right now. What they did down the stretch last year. Very impressed. The defense will be a lot better this year. Jordan Love will be a lot better. He should be. So it's in Aaron Jones was so good. That's why it's a weird situation. Aaron Jones was so good down the stretch in the playoffs. Like he could not be stopped. A lot of it's because of him. A lot of it because of the play calling offensive line as well. So it's like they don't have Aaron Jones anymore. But Josh Jacobs is going to be insane in that system, like where they really value running the football. He's going to get after it, so they're going to be deadly there. So I like the Packers. I like their additions. They spent a bit, but that's like the different, like when I grade, free agency signings, a lot of it goes into contract value, but now we kind of get in the portion where, all right, who's just talented? Like who got more talent? Who got better? And you see what the Packers did. And the Lions, I did like that they went out and got Carlton Davis, pretty decent corner. They did lose Cam Sutton because of his situation, though. I'm excited to see what these teams do in the draft. Another team that drafted really well and got a lot of guys to contribute was the Rams, so I'm excited about that this year as well. But Chiefs versus Packers, like if I had to predict today, it's a little bold not going with the Chiefs, but something about the Packers I'm kind of just feeling right now. And Not that I'm going to base anything on it at all, but I did like how just a bonus thing, I did like how the Packers looked. That was the turning point against the Chiefs on primetime football last year. That was like, all right, LaFleur, all right, Jordan Love, all right, everybody. The offensive line, I think, had a turning point that game. I think, a guy like, there were multiple of their receivers, really. Their young tight end group. I mean, I was about to just list off one guy, but I mean, I think that was and they probably stood out before them, but that was a massive turning point where I'm like, this team's legit. They had some weird games at the end last year, like the Giants and even the Panthers. They won the Panthers game, and then that Vikings game, though, I was like, okay, all right, and then they got going in the playoffs, and it's got me feeling a little good, pretty good right now. But will they have that's consistent? It's like them versus Lions. I trust the Lions stay a little more consistent. I talked about that. So can they stay consistent? Are we going to get like those wows and those drop-offs? Like what's like the Giants, the Panthers game? Again, they won the Panthers game, but still I wasn't in love with the defensive performance there. So point is, are we going to have consistency this year? Because there was a stretch earlier in the year last year where I was like, this is one of the worst teams in football. Like people had the whole meme going, love stinks, It didn't end up being the case. So can they get on a consistent path? I think they can in the playoffs. They were damn good. They were good enough to beat the Niners in that game. The Lions were as well, but they played so bad in the second half. I think the Packers probably deserved to win their game. Jordan Love continue to progress. That's what we want to see here. Let's limit the throws off the back foot, okay? It looks really good at times, but not every downfield throw under pressure has to be off the back foot. Maybe cut it down on that a little bit, but it does look really good sometimes. But some of those turnovers, it's like back foot and whip it, If you want to whip it, all right. That not the last one, the end of the season. We got to be a little more careful. But one too many back foot heaves for my liking, but they do look pretty at times. But I'm excited to see what this team's got in the draft and for the season. It's kind of my prediction right now. I think it's a little bold. I think other people maybe agree, but I do think it's a little bold because would they win 9 games last year? They almost didn't make it. I mean, the Vikings didn't get depleted. Packers wouldn't have been in the playoffs, even though I'm glad they made it because they were good. They were good and they're deserving. That talent level was deserving. The coaching was deserving, at least on offense, of being in there. And I'm glad we got to see what we saw from the Packers. And it kind of gets me excited for them for this year. As you can tell, I had them win the Super Bowl, but I can definitely change this. This is I don't know if I normally do pre-draft playoff predictions. I've done them really early before, and I've been accurate with those. That's kind of been right after the draft or a month after the draft. We'll do it a little earlier this year. So I can't remember. This might be the first time I've done them this early, so I don't want anybody thinking I'm locked in. These are but I am a guy that kind of likes to stick with my gut, so we'll see. But we're not locked in yet. This is gonna be really fun, and I think we got a lot to go off of, to evaluate these teams after free agency, who they lost, who they got, coaching staffs as well, which people kind of forget to factor in sometimes. So there you have it. Let me know your guys' way too early picks in the comments, like who you got making the playoffs, or if you want to put NFC, AFC Championship game, Super Bowl. Let's hear it. Always talking with you guys on Twitter as well. We got all kinds. Let's go back to that draft coverage. Back to that. All kinds of it on the channel. More to come. We'll have some live streams. But yeah, that's going to do it. Check out our sponsors. Links pinned in the comments. Anything you're looking for, it's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.